Hello everyone, and welcome back to a chatty, sassy video here on YouTube where I talk about all things luxury, be it luxury travel, luxury fashion, or life's luxuries in general. And today I'm definitely going to be getting sassy because I'm going to be talking about my recent experiences with Vestiaire Collective and why I think that their current business model and business practices are not the best place to buy or sell when it comes to luxury goods. So I've always been a big fan of buying pre-loved luxury, and I've bought a lot of pre-loved luxury myself. I'm also a big fan of selling your luxury goods on whenever you are no longer interested in them. And because of that, I do a lot of online selling. I've also done quite a bit of online purchasing, and so I feel like that I'm pretty experienced in this area. And Vestiaire Collective is a platform that I have used for several years now, but recently in the past few months, they've become very, very difficult. And so I want to talk about those difficulties, both from a buyer and a seller perspective, and why I think that you should probably stay away from them at this current point in time. So starting out from the seller's perspective, it used to be that when I would sell on Vestiaire Collective, it was super easy. I would get usually 90% of what I was asking. They were only charging like a 10% fee to sell your goods on Vestiaire Collective, which meant that I could list it at a much lower, more attractive price to buyers than I could on platforms like Poshmark. Now, over time, that has changed. They are now taking up to 30% on items that you sell. And I know this because I was recently looking at purchasing an item on Vestiaire Collective, and I'll get into the buyer side of things in a bit, but the actual seller was saying that they could only go so low on their price because Vestiaire was going to take 30% from them. And that is a huge amount for an online seller to be taking when you are the one who's listing it, you're the one who's shipping it. It isn't something that's sitting with them. They have no risk involved. And so to take 30% is not great, particularly when platforms like Poshmark take 20, eBay I think takes 15%. And so if you're going to be selling it yourself and doing the legwork yourself, you want to make sure that you're selling on a platform that you're going to get the most from, in part because that's going to be more attractive to buyers because you can list it at a lower price and still get the same amount. I've sold 6 items now on Vestiaire Collective, these 6 of which is currently on its way to its most recent purchaser. But I've never had any issues with my items being rejected or anything like that. I do know that Deb from Wild Unfiltered had some issues with items going to Vestiaire Collective for their authentication quality control process. And those items were actually rejected and saying there were things wrong with them when there weren't. And so I know that other people have had issues with the past. I'd never had any issues with them from a seller perspective, but the commission that they are now taking on items is making it harder for a seller to get items sold because of that. But also it's harder for sellers to sell items on Vestiaire Collective because of the buyer side of things. And so I want to talk about that as well. I mentioned that I'd recently tried to buy an item on Vestiaire Collective, and this is an item that was on my wish list. It's the Prada 2005 re-edition in Saffiano leather in wave blue. It is an item that I've really, really wanted. I had wished that I'd just gone ahead and bought it in the store when it was available because it was a seasonal color. I didn't, and I've regretted it ever since. So I've been on the hunt for one in excellent condition. This one was in brand new condition. The seller and I settled on a price that for me was going to be $1,600 USD. And I figured that there would probably be some sort of shipping fee that I'd have to pay on top of that to Vestiaire. What I was not expecting was when I went to checkout, this $1,600 item went from $1,600 to $2,197 with shipping fees, which were $65, and then taxes, duties, and fees. But that's on top of what I found out was actually fees that were buyer fees associated with the authentication process to Vestiaire Collective in that $1,600 purchase price. And so to be charging me those fees, to be taking 30% commission from the seller supposedly to cover some of those fees, it feels a lot like double dipping to me. But then you go into the taxes and fees side of things, and they were charging, I think it was 11% sales tax, if my math is correct. It was somewhere between 10 and 11% of sales tax for this item to come into the country. And first off, that's not my sales tax percentage. It's just slightly below. It's 9.875%, I think is what our sales tax is here in Nashville. And so they were already charging sales tax that was greater than what our actual sales tax percentage is. But then there was another duties and fees that were in there. Well, currently, at the time that I am filming this, at the time that I was trying to purchase this, the Supreme Court in the US had struck down some of these extra duties and tariffs. And so many of the companies are not even charging them anymore, like UPS, DHL, FedEx. And so the amount that they were charging was about 30% of the item's cost. And to be charging 30% of the item's cost, saying that that's going to cover my duties, but not allowing me to just select to pay those upon arrival, was very frustrating to me, knowing that it would probably only be at most 10% that I would be paying. And to have that charged to me, I know the Vestiaire would not be paying all of that to the US government to send that in. And so knowing that, it feels like that they are trying to make money off of the tariff situation that's going on here in the US. Well, I had a thought then, because I was like, you know what? I really want this item. It's located in Australia, and one of my best friends in the world lives in Australia. And so I messaged Meredith, and she's like, yeah, sure, I can help you get it. That's no problem. And what we found out is that the listed price for this item, even before we put in an offer on it, the listed price conversion-wise actually went ahead and converted to what I was paying USD, because of all the fees that are associated in my purchase price for the USD price were much, much greater than what was factored in for Meredith in Australia, because both the bag and Meredith were in Australia. It's like, okay, so here's all these duties, these fees. And so it's like, okay, well, Meredith put in an offer, it was accepted, and then she went to check out. And now, not only were there the fees that were included in the offered purchase price that she had sent to the seller, but then she had duties on top of it. And both she and the seller are in Sydney. And so it's not even passing to another state in Australia. It is staying within that same region. It's staying within the same country. And we can only figure one of two things. And I don't think that the second situation is likely, for a reason that I'll give you here in just a second. The first situation that I personally think it is I'm betting that the authentication center for Vestiaire is not located in Australia. And so I'm betting that this item was going to go from the seller somewhere outside of Australia and then come back into Australia. But that being said, it was still charging, I think it was 430 AUD in duties for this bag for Meredith, who is in Australia, with the seller and the bag in Australia. And I do believe that the bag is in Australia. That has not already been sent to Vestiaire Collective, because I asked for a couple more photos to be uploaded, which the seller immediately uploaded. They uploaded it within like 30 minutes. And so that tells me that the seller does physically still have the bag in Australia. And that means that they are either sending it out of the country, which I had no option of whether to send it to Vestiaire or not. It was automatically going to Vestiaire. And so having this bag sent to wherever it's being sent to and then coming back into the country, they were going to charge Meredith massive amounts of duties, which makes no sense. And so because of that, we decided not to purchase that item, which is heartbreaking for me. And if you follow my Instagram stories, you'll see where I posted an Instagram story talking about how annoyed that I currently was. And this was the situation that I was referring to. And I just feel like Vestiaire is one, they are not being transparent into how they are calculating these fees or why they are charging and calculating these fees. And their fee pricing system feels like that they are charging both the buyer and the seller for using the platform, which by having buyer service fees and seller service fees, I find that to be a bit unethical. You should really just be charging one or the other, not both of us for it, for what is essentially the same service. And then to charge sales tax that is far more than what my sales tax even is, on top of duties and tariffs. Again, that feels sort of dishonest to me. And I know that there are people who have had issues with Vestiaire in the past. I've bought items off of Vestiaire and the items have always come perfect. They've been exactly as described. So I've had no issues in the past buying and selling. This is the first time that I've come across an issue. But knowing the reputation that Vestiaire has, and now finally starting to experience these issues for myself, it is a company that I just no longer feel like I can recommend utilizing, either as a buyer or as a seller, because it just feels a bit sleazy, it feels a bit slimy, and it's way too expensive. When I'm having an item that ends up being from $1,600 to $2,200 essentially, $600 in duties, taxes, and fees? Actually, I need to back out some of that. It's actually more like $750 is what Vestiaire is saying that they are collecting in terms of duty, taxes, and fees, because that price that I mentioned of $1,600 had about $150 in fees going straight to Vestiaire. That is a lot. I would rather just wait and buy from a company like Fashion File, where it is returnable, where it's easy, and not have to go through all this back and forth, not have the issue of waiting for it to ship to an authentication site and then sent to me, which could take a couple of weeks. Overall, I think it's just a platform to stay away from at this point in time. I hope it gets better, because prior to this experience, it was a great platform. I didn't have any issues. I didn't have all of these expensive fees when I've purchased in the past, even though they were coming from other countries. And so I think that just for right now, take a pause on Vestiaire Collective and wait to see if they maybe adjust their business practices to fit the reality of the world that we are in. Let me know in the comments down below if you've had any experiences with Vestiaire, positive or negative, particularly if they are very recent experiences. And with that, I hope you have a great rest of your day, everybody. Bye!